guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we are going to do some of my favorite and also some of, in my personal opinion, the scariest Reddit stories. Now these are stories that I literally had to dig through the internet to find because it's been so long since I've read some of these, but I found them for you guys because I think these ones are really creepy and they're some of my favorites. So I thought that I would read them to you guys. It's not going to be word for word. I'm going to kind of put it into my own words and then I'll have them linked in the bio below so you could go read the full story. And a lot of these actually have images that go along with them. So I think that makes it so much scarier. That's why I chose most of these, is because I think that they're really creepy with the images. So let's just jump right into it and get to the spooky stuff. First story that I found is Satan's bed and breakfast. This one has been haunting my mind for years. So this starts off when OP was 5 years old and they were taking a trip with their family to upstate New York to go see family and to go visit them, but it was a really long road trip, so their parents had already planned to stay at a bed and breakfast along the way. So they had reservations to a place. Now what makes this even creepier is it was storming really heavily. So as they were driving along, they had a lot of wind and a lot of rain, and they had stopped at a park along the way to kind of get their energy out. Their mom wanted to make sure that the kids weren't like bouncing around in the hotel room and were pretty much ready to go to sleep when they got there. So they got out at this park and one of OP's siblings ended up finding this little necklace. It was kind of like a pendant, like what I'm wearing now, except that the pendant was a pentagram. And the mom thought this was very unusual. So she ended up just throwing it in her purse and not really thinking about it, which is a little unusual. I feel like I don't know if I would have put it in my purse because I'm really superstitious. They end up driving again to try to get to the bed and breakfast before it gets too late. But by the time they get there, it's pretty late in the night already. So they're pretty much ready to just go to bed immediately. They arrive at the bed and breakfast and an older woman greets them. OP remembers that the older woman was missing a bunch of teeth. And that really stood out to her because she thought that was a little unusual, but you know, old people lose their teeth quite frequently. But the older woman ends up telling them that there's no rooms available, even though the parents had reserved a room ahead of time. So the parents found this very bizarre. But they also ended up looking around and noticing that the hotel looked super empty. So they weren't entirely convinced that this woman had no rooms available. But the older woman ends up telling them that there is another bed and breakfast that her friend owns that's just a couple miles up the road and they could go there instead. But not before the older woman says, hey, like my husband is an artist, you could get a tour of some of his work before you leave. So the parents agree to this and they start noticing all these pictures lining up the walls, but the pictures are of young women missing teeth, just like the older woman, and they're in very compromising, strange positions, kind of like a BDSM type of energy where they have ball gags and they're tied up. The parents are pretty freaked out by this, so they're trying to get the tour to go along a little faster as the older woman is explaining that her husband just loves making art and these are all of his like prized possessions. And the parents are getting pretty creeped out by this, but they're just ready to go to bed. So they do the whole tour and then they say, okay, we're gonna head over to the second bed and breakfast. Now, this is where it gets even creepier. They arrive at the second bed and breakfast and two women who are also older and also missing teeth come to the door and they explain like the older woman had called them and they were here to have the room that was promised. The older women are like, okay, yeah, we have the room available. It's gonna be in this barn. Now this barn is a renovated barn, but it's kind of like outside and it's a really unusual room. OP describes it as being kind of like run down, but the inside is really nice. Something that OP mentioned is that the older women kept trying to get the kids to kind of go away from the parents and go see their cats, because they had like an obsession with cats and they were like, oh, come see our kitties and we have a bunch of cat stuff. But the parents were a little weirded out by this, so they said, let's just go to the barn and we'll get a good night's sleep and then we'll be able to just leave quickly in the morning. So they go to the barn, they're starting to unpack their things, but something really, really unusual about this barn is none of the windows lock, none of the doors lock, there's no locks anywhere. So the family is essentially open to the world. Anyone could come into the barn, which is really creepy, and the dad really, really doesn't like this. So he starts putting furniture up against the walls to try to keep anybody out who tried to get in. But also he said that he noticed that the wall was like really structurally unstable to the point where it seemed like it could be knocked over. So he tried to cover the walls with furniture as well, pretty much took all the furniture in the barn and put it against the walls and the doors. But just as they were about to go to sleep, one of the older women comes in with a plate of freshly baked blueberry muffins. Now, OP says that at this point, they were super, super hungry because they hadn't eaten in hours. So they really, really wanted to taste one of those delicious blueberry muffins. But of course, since these older women are very suspicious, the parents say, no, you're not gonna eat those blueberry muffins. So the kids go to sleep very sad that they didn't get to eat the blueberry muffins. Everything is okay and fine for a bit until one of OP's sisters ends up waking up in the middle of the night screaming bloody murder, just screaming and screaming because she had a night terror. And most of the family was having trouble sleeping in general, especially the parents. And the screaming really, really didn't help. So at this point, we're on very high alert. And then the parents end up noticing something very, very unusual on the wall. So earlier in the night when it wasn't dark, they saw this painting in the corner, but it wasn't an unusual painting. It just looked like a bunch of logs and maybe like a water scene. But the scary thing about it is when the lights were turned off, the painting suddenly looked totally different. There was a bunch of women being burned and there was a bunch of logs that were burning them. And it was one of those weird paintings where you could only see certain images when it's in the dark. So the parents were really, really weirded out by this. Most of the family didn't want to end up sleeping, but they tried to get a little more rest for their road trip the next day. So the rest of the night goes okay and they're doing fine. Wake up in the morning, they go to check out. And then the two older women end up giving the kids these little wooden cats that they said they had made by hand, which I will include a picture as proof that this happened. And they were just cute little cats, you know, they don't really look that suspicious or scary to me. And they end up driving off, but when they're driving away, the mom notices that she no longer has the necklace in her purse, which she thought was really weird because it had been in her purse the whole night. And then as they're driving away, they see the older woman brushing off these tiles in front of the bed and breakfast, and they notice that she had been covering up tiles that made a pentagram. Mom had also noticed that there was a symbol of the third reach. This is a part of the story that I think is a little fishy, but apparently during the time, the grandparents of OP were really, really nervous. There was a lot of satanic activity going around in the neighborhood at the time and just that area in general. So they believed that the bed and breakfast owners, both the original old lady and the second old lady, were Satanists. Now this was during the time of the satanic panic. So I don't know if they were actually Satanists, but a lot of their behavior is very suspicious. So I think this story is really, really creepy. I'll always remember it just because it has a lot of cool visuals in it. If you read the original story, it has a lot more detail in it. I just kind of wanted to give you guys a shorter form of the story, so this video isn't like hours long. Moving on, we have a bit of a shorter story. This one's called Something About Her Was Off. This one scares me to my core because the pictures in it are horrifying. Just wait until I include these pictures because you guys will be terrified too. So it was OP's 21st birthday and her boyfriend's mom wanted to do something special for her. So they said, let's go downtown. We're gonna go to a bar and then the boyfriend can meet us there and your friends will be there and we'll just have a good time. So OP thinks this sounds really cool. And they end up parking and they get out of the car and start walking towards the bar. But they're at a crosswalk waiting for the light. And OP says everything is fine, except that she does notice this kind of unusual woman standing pretty close to her. Now, when I picture this woman, I'm kind of picturing Eugenia Cooney, if you guys know who that is, because the description sounds very familiar. But she said that the woman had this long, dark hair that went down to almost her waist. She had on a striped dress and she had very, very dark eyes, almost black. So she said that the weird part about this woman is that she was standing very, very close to her, but almost like a little kid, you know, when they're standing behind their mom and they're kind of huddled up. She said that the woman just had an energy of a toddler that was trying to cling to her. And she said she got pretty uncomfortable with this, but she didn't think too much of it because she thought maybe the woman was just trying to make room for other people to wait for the crosswalk. But the woman's behavior starts to get very, very strange. She said the woman starts to plug her nose, you know, like this, like when you go swimming. And she starts to kind of like do this motion, like she's smelling something really, really gross. And this is where OP starts to get uncomfortable. She thinks that maybe this woman is not the most mentally stable. She just wants to cross the street at this point. But the woman keeps acting like something around her is scaring her. And then finally the crosswalk light turns on and OP thinks, okay, I could finally escape this woman. But she said that as they're walking across the crosswalk, the woman just keeps getting closer and closer and closer, like borderline trying to jump in her skin. And that's where the boyfriend's mom jumps in and she thinks that maybe this woman is scared of something or she's just not doing okay. So she asks, you know, do you need any help? Are you doing okay? And the woman said, it's not safe here. And so the boyfriend's mom is starting to get uncomfortable. She doesn't really know how to help this woman. So they're just trying to walk faster and faster and faster. But the woman is practically sprinting, trying to catch up with them and follows literally every single move they do. So even when they take a sharp turn, the woman is literally right behind them. They're not really sure what to do at this point, but they think that once they get to the bar, this woman will stop following them, obviously, you know. But no, it doesn't end there. The woman ends up going into the bar with them and ends up sitting at their table. Now the setup of this bar, it's like really, really long booths where a lot of people can fit in it. So the woman is sitting across from them at their booth, but they kind of have some distance between them. And the boyfriend's mom ends up telling the woman, you know, you need to stop, you're being weird. And the woman says, but I want to stay with you guys. And so this woman clearly wants to be attached to them for some reason. They try to ignore her, but OP says that every single time they ignore her, she keeps scooting closer and closer and closer. I'm gonna insert the image of this woman here, and it's kind of hard to spot, but once you spot it, this woman is terrifying. It's like the straight up Grudge looking at you. So she ends up getting closer and closer, and at this point, OP and the boyfriend's mom have absolutely had it. They're done with this lady. They just want her to go away. So they get security to try to kick her out. But of course, she's arguing with security. She's pretty much having a full-blown temper tantrum like a toddler would. And she's banging her fists on the table and she's saying, no, I don't want to go. It's not safe, and freaking out. But eventually the bouncer is able to kick her out and OP thinks that everything is fine. But the weirdest part about this is the woman ends up standing outside the window, peeking in for a whole 10 minutes, just staring at OP. But the rest of the night goes smoothly and we don't hear about the woman again. But OP says that to this day, she has no idea what this woman wanted. She really has no idea who this woman was, if she was mentally ill or what the case was. I think it is probably a case of a woman with schizophrenia is what it sounds like to me, but who knows, honestly. All I know is that the pictures of her are very, very scary. Next up, we have a story that is quite popular on Reddit. I know that a lot of people find it very scary. I find it scary, so I wanted to include it. It's called The Bridge. Now, this story also includes quite a few photos, so I'll be inserting them throughout the story. It starts with OP explaining that he lives in the North Wales location of the UK, and he says that growing up he lived along the countryside. There really wasn't much to do, so they pretty much spent most of their time exploring random creepy locations and pretty much just spending most of their time outside, and this is what led them to finding the bridge. Now, this bridge was really interesting. You'll see what I mean when I insert the pictures, but it's like a cement bridge that has like an opening, like a hole that you could climb down into the bridge, and it's kind of like an overpass, and then underneath there are train tracks. And OP said that him and his friends were always super curious about like where this would lead. So they ended up finding a little opening, but the opening had this really big metal disc. So they had to go and get some tools and then come back. Luckily, the tools helped them get into it, but this is where things get really, really claustrophobic. He says that it was a very, very tight squeeze, and they have to go down this old ladder to try to descend into the actual like walking part of it. So they're descending, it's getting tighter and tighter, but it's comfortable so far until they start getting to the actual tunnel part of it, where it's kind of like a square. And they said that they had to crawl on their hands and knees essentially and crouch to be able to get to the end of the tunnel. But the tunnel is really, really creepy because it's pretty much pitch black in there. So they can't really see where they're going or really what's ahead, which is terrifying. As they're starting to get closer, OP's friend says, "Hey, do you guys see that object in the distance?" And they can't really make out what it is, but they know that there's something at the end of the tunnel. So they keep crawling and crawling, and eventually they end up getting to an object. Now this object is a folding chair, you know, like one of those lawn chairs. It's one of those, but it's facing the wall. Very, very weird. And there's a picture on the wall of one of those like nudie magazines, like think Playboy, except that OP described it as just a little sinister. It didn't seem very playful or fun. It just looked a little ominous. But the weirdest part about this picture is that the woman in the picture had her eyes completely cut out. So this, combined with the chair facing the wall, made them feel a little uneasy. They were starting to get a little nervous. That is, until they saw the worst part about this. They saw I'm gonna use the British term, a rubber sitting next to the chair. But this would already be scary enough because ew. But then they discovered that it's absolutely covered in blood. And at this point, they start freaking out because they don't know who's been down here or if they're coming back, because clearly someone who has all those items together is not someone that can be trusted. So they start sprinting out of this tunnel, but they're having to crawl on their hands and knees, and they're scraping their knees and their elbows along the entire way until they finally escape. And as much as I wish that there was an update and they discovered who it was, they never discovered who it was. They said that it's a very, very small area and everyone knows everyone. And they said that there's literally no one they could think of in the neighborhood that would be down there doing those weird sort of things. So to this day, the man that sits in the chair with the bloody rubbers is still unknown. He could be down there to this day. So that's something to think about if you're in the North Wales area. Okay, finally, we have my all-time favorite Let's Not Meet Reddit story. This one doesn't have pictures, which I'm so sad about. But this one, I got like tears in my eyes. Like my eyes were straight up watering reading it because it's so creepy to imagine. I hope you guys like this one too, but let's just jump right into it. This one's called Nightmare Experience at My Friend's Cabin. Now, OP goes on to explain that his friends Kevin, Ryan, and Tommy were going to Kevin's cabin one summer, and they had been doing this pretty much every summer since they were little kids. But usually the parents would come along, and so they had a lot of adult supervision. But since in this story they were finally juniors in high school, they thought, okay, it's time to go to the cabin without any supervision. I think we're old enough. So they end up driving down to the cabin, and it's really, really hot out. You know, it's the middle of summer. And the way they described where Kevin's cabin is, it's very bizarre. It's on a very remote island, so there's an island surrounding a big, big lake, and they said that they pretty much had to park on the total opposite end of the island, and the only way to reach the cabin is by boat, which makes the story even weirder when we get to the details. Because of it being so remote, there really wasn't that many people around. They said that the closest cabin was around a mile away, so, you know, it was pretty secluded. It was just the cabin, them, their boat, a dock, and a lake. So not really much around. So it's pretty private. They didn't really expect to see anyone around. Then the inside of the actual cabin, it's very typical layout. There's a bedroom, a bathroom, and then a living room. But the weird part about this is that there's windows, like large windows surrounding the whole cabin. So every room has a big window with no blinds, no curtains, nothing. All you could really see is a big lake, and that's it. Anybody could be looking in, anybody could be looking out. It's very not private. But they didn't think much of this because of how remote it was. Now, getting into the actual story, it was the third night that they were there. They were up late drinking beers around the lake. They had a little bonfire, just chatting, you know, typical teenage things. And they decided that they would go on the dock and look at the lake. And there was some nice moonlight along the lake, lots of stars out. So very picturesque, very peaceful. Until Ryan, one of OP's friends, says, "What the hell is that?" And they're looking out at the lake and they all start to see something bobbing in the water. Now this is really, really weird because there shouldn't be anything out this late at night, like on top of the lake. But this really, really creeps OP out because he says that it looks like a chopped head bobbing in the water. He said it has long black hair, super pale skin with just these eye sockets, not even really eyes, but it looked like it was just looking at them and bobbing up and down. Now, OP thinks that he's kind of overreacting and his friends are hoping that it's nothing weird. So they kind of just chalk it up to it being a loon bird, which is a bird that likes to hunt at night and it has long black feathers. So they thought that maybe it was just a bird bobbing up and down trying to get fish out of the water. Nothing too unusual really. So they try to relax and they head back to the bonfire. But at this point, OP really has to pee. So he goes into the woods and he's just going pee, nothing unusual. He's looking out at the lake, but then he notices something in the water again. But this time it's 30 yards closer and it's that same head bobbing up and down. At this point, he feels like the head's eyes are just on him and that they're watching his every move. So he's pretty terrified. He has no idea what this is. He doesn't think it's a bird anymore. So he starts to finish up really, really quickly so he could run back to his friends. He runs back to them and he says, "Hey guys, you need to take a look at this and then we need to go inside." So they end up taking a look at it and they all agree this is not a bird. They don't know what it is. But they go back to the cabin, which is always a mistake in a horror movie. You should just be getting off the island and going home at this point. But they go into the cabin and they decide, you know, maybe it's just a log bouncing. We don't really know. We can't really be sure it's anything creepy. So they decide to go to bed and they're kind of winding down and everything's okay. OP's having a lot of trouble sleeping though, probably because he saw the scariest thing ever floating in the lake. But he's struggling to sleep and everything's okay until he starts hearing footsteps. Now these footsteps are going back and forth, like heavy footsteps around the cabin. And he's starting to get really, really spooked by this because who the heck is going to be at the cabin like this late at night when it's so remote? Like you literally have to take a boat to get to this cabin. He's starting to get a little nervous. He just keeps trying to sleep because he doesn't really want to think about it too much or it'll become real in his mind. But the footsteps finally stop. So he's like, okay, maybe I'm just imagining it. But then he starts to hear the footsteps slowly going up the stairs. But the weird part about this is the footsteps go back down the stairs. So he's wondering what the heck is happening. But then he starts to hear the footsteps sprint down the footpath, like back and forth, just sprinting. Now he has no idea what's going on at this point, but he is officially very, very creeped out and he thinks, okay, I'm gonna wake up the other guys. We probably need to leave now. Before he could wake up the other guys, Ryan comes walking into the room. He's very frantic and he says, "We need to leave immediately." He's not really explaining anything. He's just packing up his bags. So the other guys are like, okay, like, let's leave, because they have no idea what's going on, but they can tell that he's extremely frightened at this point. They pack up all their stuff and they go on the boat and they drive the boat to their car. And as they're driving the boat, Ryan explains why he thought they needed to leave. This is the part I'm literally getting chills thinking about it, but he said that while he was sleeping, he heard a noise and he woke up and looked at the window. Remember, the windows have no blinds or curtains. He looked out the window and he saw this pale face peeking through the window, like towards the right corner of the window. Long, stringy black hair, soulless eyes, same thing that was in the lake, just peeking at him. At that point, he was so scared that he couldn't even function. He said, we need to leave now, because he had no idea what he was looking at. But the weirdest part about this is his bedroom was the highest up. So the only way that you could see through the window is if you had a really tall ladder, or you were 8 feet tall, like freaking Slender Man, or you were able to float. So this weirded out all of them to an extreme point. They had no idea what was in the lake. They had no idea what was looking through the window. So pretty much the rest of the way home, they just drove in silence. And Opie said that he had gone back to the cabin a few years later, and also his friends had gone back. He said that Ryan was never able to, because he was never really able to fully get over this incident. He said that after Ryan had seen this thing, he had spent weeks not being able to sleep. He had to get sleeping pills. He had to see a therapist because this image just would not escape his brain. Just this image of this floating head with pale skin and long black hair. That one is definitely one of the scariest stories I've ever read on Reddit. I have no idea what they saw that night. I don't know if it was paranormal. I don't know if it was real. Really, really creepy to even imagine that. But I hope you guys enjoyed some of these spooky stories. I could definitely do a part 2 because I have a lot of like niche Reddit stories that a lot of people haven't heard that I think are really creepy. So let me know if you guys want more. Don't forget to like and subscribe, turn on those post notifications. It really helps me out. I'm trying to grow my channel. You know, I'm a small channel, but super grateful for all my subscribers so far. So stay tuned for more spooky videos. Bye guys.